Hello.
Yeah, right. Welcome, welcome.
Yeah, welcome friends. Come on in. I am your weirdo friend. You can find me at your weirdo friend. And this is my friend Arturo. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Arturo Dominguez. I do the Decolonized Journalism newsletter here. Um, and you can find me everywhere on social media under the same handle. So that I have here at Extreme Arturo. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this. This is fun. This is going to be fun. I've been kind of following you. I don't know. It's been a while, and
Yeah.
I remember like I don't know if I want to use the word shy about it, but you were a little reluctant to start doing videos and like it's been really cool watching you progress and watching you grow on the platform. So like I've been looking forward to this like we were talking about when we were before we went live just now, like I've never done like my own lives, right? I'm always a guest. And I've been meaning to start like my own podcast type thing and I haven't done it yet, but in that same vein, I'm watching you and you're doing this stuff and it's like it's really cool because I'm more of a writer type of journalist type thing, and I don't mind being guests. I just don't know. I just haven't made the leap yet. But it's been cool, man. It's been cool watching you. It's been
Oh,
fun.
I appreciate you a lot, and I didn't know that I guess when I saw you on other people's Substack lives, I assumed that you also had your own, and then I was just somehow missing them or whatever. But
Yeah.
I also, like, started just as, like, a writer, and I didn't want to go, I did not want to I have never wanted to show my face on a screen, especially not on a video. I remember my youngest sibling who was like, this was back in the before times, and they were like, "You should go on TikTok," and I was like, "That is a very bad idea," you know?
Yeah.
Uh just because I was just like, especially because it's like my students are on there. They will eat me alive if they see their professor there. No, thank you. No, thank you. Hard pass on that. But one of the reasons why I started doing lives is I realized that it felt like um, people are when they're really stressed out and they're really scared, that it is helpful to see a face and hear a voice. And I think it also helps. I think sometimes there are also bots and a
Right.
lot of people who like the sort of like, I don't know what I would call it, but like there is definitely an like astroturf market of like
Mhm.
AI generated Substack content. And when you can't tell that a person has a face and a voice, especially with my handle, your weirdo friend, you can really tell that I never meant to go live ever. But but yeah, like so I wanted to like not only let people know, hey, I'm a real person, but also I was hoping that people would feel a sense of uh some kind of not some kind of comfort and seeing a face,
Right,
Uh,
right. I guess a lot of people are probably like me, look, we seek authenticity, so we want to, see people just talk about stuff, in a conversationalist tone, not breaking news all the time in your face, you know what I mean? Like, if I hear the words breaking news again, my head's gonna explode, but yeah,
yeah.
being genuine and being authentic, I think really goes a long way, especially in these times, where things are just so crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that we got to the place that we've gotten, in part because a lot of things were I mean, there are a lot of reasons, including white supremacy, and colonialism, and imperialism. But another, like, and adding to that is this performative, sort of curated, it's weird. It's like, so much of, like, media professionalism, and I don't really necessarily oh, dear. Let me see. Sorry. So sorry about that. Um, that was signal ringing. So yeah, one of the things that, I just got off track, but I feel like, a lot of yeah, I just feel like there's something about professionalism, media professionalism where when you're saying everything is breaking news and then you're just reporting and parroting what a governmental agency of some kind
Right.
has told you, regardless of the other, without even bothering to like try to discover the facts on the ground, that creates an erosion of trust that wears away democracy. And even though I'm just a teacher trying to do public education on a larger platform, I think you're right that people are, oh dear, people are, I'm just going to put that down and just pretend that my laptop that I was using does not exist. I will just we'll try to make a makeshift. Sorry, but oh man, that's not going to work. I'll just hold it. We'll just go back to old school holding my phone, um, and wait until signal stops ringing. But yeah, yeah. So I
Yeah, I
do think
think
you're right about authenticity.
right, like, a lot of it comes it feels packaged, and, like, I've seen a lot of the videos where, you have the news anchor and, like, how they code switch, right? How this is my news anchor voice, but this is me in real life, and I feel like news anchors are just actors now, you know what I mean? So, like, it's just weird. I mean, you know, legacy media like New York Times and stuff like that are good for, certain things. They have access, right? They can break certain stories, they can get inside info. But, a lot of those stories, it's a lot of like, what are they not saying, right? Because we talked about this yesterday when I was on the live, and it's essentially like lying by omission, right? So, like, when you don't hear, like, for example, we're talking about Venezuela, and all these decisions are being made about Venezuela, but they're all being made by people here, and you're only talking to Venezuelan immigrants here. Nobody's talking to Venezuelans in Venezuela. Nobody's getting that perspective. And, that there's a sharp contrast there. When you talk to Venezuelans, like, they don't like Maria Corina Machado. They're not thrilled about the kidnapping of Maduro. They're like, they want him back. There's a lot of different voices that just aren't being heard. And it's, for me, it's crazy to see the media talk about what are our next steps in Venezuela? What's next for Venezuela? Like, it's our decision.
Right.
And they still have a president, they still have a functioning government, there's 30 million people there. Like, I think they should have a say in this, right? And it's just so weird to see it like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think weird is I mean, I think it's horrifying. I mean, when
It
we're
is,
talking
actually, yeah.
about, yeah, I mean, just like in terms of like kidnapping, like a head of state, I have not given up about trying to prop up my phone. I'm going to try one more thing. I just want you to know, everyone to know that my rig right now is a yoga block and a deck of tarot cards. But we're just going to go,
Whatever works. Whatever
yeah.
works.
Well, it appears to have worked, and it's not ringing. So the moment that my tarot cards start ringing, we know that there's a problem, right?
Yeah,
So,
right.
you know, so yeah, yeah. No, the thing that I was going to say about the horrifying part is just, I think to me the horrifying part is this is a sovereign nation, and also just the way in which the alleged news media has um, just sort of taken the regime at the Donroe doctrine and not thought, hey, how are we breaking a post World War II? I mean, granted, it's not as if the United States has not been meddling in South America for fucking decades, right? And I think that because our education has been um, highly propagandized, I think that it's hard for people to understand that. And I think had I not been so the what though my dad is Lenape and was Jewish before he married my Catholic mother, I think being a child of the 80s and learning about the School of Americas and having knowing priests that were in my diocese who died down there trying to do some kind of like advocacy and where I mean so I guess that's the kind of I I think it was always on my radar and
Yeah.
knowing that there would be a story that we weren't necessarily being told. Um, but, I mean, I think that, yes, we know that a lot of like school textbooks are notoriously run by, conservative, is the right word, white supremacist outlets who are really just very interested not in the truth, but in something that's airbrushing the United States as the evergreen hero of every situation.
Right.
And yeah, but to me, it's just one. It's part of a piece of this, right? Like this kind of curated ignorance about the violence that the United States has enacted in other countries and destabilizing other countries, and we get to like pretend and celebrate ourselves as, oh, we're a nation of immigrants, and that's great. However, comma,
Right.
we colonized what is certainly called the United States, stole a lot of territory, and then on top of that, have a history of destabilizing nations, and then being like, "Why do we have all these immigrants?" And I'm just like, and
Right.
I am not anti-immigrant, but I just think I'm just aghast by that, you know.
Right,
Um,
if we one of the things and most people know what we've done in Latin America in an abstract sort of way, right? They don't really dig into the granular details of each incident. I mean, there's 30 if you include the Caribbean, there's 33 countries we're talking about, so it's hard to for us to grasp all of it, but, despite us knowing just, just a kind of that abstract view and not digging into details, then we just tend to believe what the media is saying. Everything we've ever been told about Venezuela has been a one-sided story, right? Cuba, all that stuff. And I started learning about this when my grandmother moved to the US to live the rest of her life around her kids and grandkids because she stayed in Cuba the whole time. She never left, never wanted to leave. And she would tell me these stories that got me looking into things. And I started seeing a different narrative. So, since then, for like the last 20 years or so, I talk to people in Cuba and I talk to people in Venezuela and in Nicaragua and in all these places that are supposed to be this evil, you know, communist thing that's coming for the United States. These are our enemy. And it's just not that way at all. Most of the people in Cuba don't want to overthrow their government. They want to reform it. They're not interested in civil war. They don't want to go into further destabilizing the country. Venezuela's the same way. You don't get these narratives in the US. So like, yeah, sure, these people in these countries are not thrilled with their government all of the time, but when are we, right? It's just standard practice in every scenario, no matter what type of governing structure you have. And, Cuba's not perfect. Obviously, I have issues with some of the way the government does things with, repressing speech and stuff like that, and same issues with Venezuela, but, those are internal issues, right? It's not for us to go into another country and say, "This is how democracy should work," when, their democracy might just look a little different, you know?
well, you know, yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking about the United States. I mean, like we have suppressed free speech.
For sure.
We have had a history of not only assassinating political leaders. I mean, we just celebrated MLK Junior Day, right? W we and he is not the only person, who is at the was at the forefront of the Black liberation movement, who was not only, who was assassinated, and I'm also thinking about just COINTELPRO. It is not as if, and then we, there's I forget, is it called the Patriot Act? The thing that surveilled
Mhm.
is that yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
2002. Yeah. Patriot Act.
Yeah. So we've been effectively living in a police state for quite some time, and I think
Yep.
that, like, there have been some pretty panicked reporters, especially in around the intersections of tech,
Yeah.
also, like, military interventions that have been I mean, I remember being in grad school, and I was, tired. I was tired because I was constantly, like, you know, I do not recommend grad school. It's like but, just saying that out loud, if you want to find a way to destroy your self-esteem and your finances, then please, by all means. But I remember that being, a young person in my 20s and first hearing about Peter Thiel and, hearing about, this sort of technology that he had developed and how it was being used for mass surveillance, and hearing these really early warnings about the tech oligarchy, kind
Mhm.
of what they used at the time. And I remember just being so naive and thinking, well, what are they going to find on my computer? A whole bunch of pictures of
Right.
my dog. And, even when I sat down with some of my friends who are computer programmers, computer engineers, I don't know what they call them now. Their terminology is switching, but uh, they're, you know, they got to rebrand. But, my friend was sitting down with me and she's like, listen, it's not about what you think is benign and what is legal now. It's about what will become illegal. And
Right.
I didn't she said that to me in January, before, Trump was in office, and now, as soon as he came in, right, we saw the clawback, right? Like, free speech that people thought that they had during the before times, he's like, "Oh, you did this thing that I don't like before? Well, guess what? I'm gonna claw back all your rights and punish you or abduct you for shit that you said when I wasn't even in office," you know?
Right.
It's just a whole it's just a whole vibe, but, I mean, I fell prey to that sort of, well, and I think it was, frankly, because I was tired, because I was living on, like, poverty wages, it is cost to be poor. I was just like, "Well, what if like, there's only so much I can hold in my head," right?
Right.
And now I'm like, "Well, damn," like, and I think a lot. So, I mean, when I think about that phrase, low information voters,
Mm.
I know that people say that with a kind of frustration, but as somebody who lived on poverty wages, until I got my first actual paying job where I could like afford rent with another person and not like worrying about, how the fuck I was going to pay rent. That was in my early 40s. So I've only had like, about 6 years, you know, or less of, and when you're that tired, it's hard to read. It's hard to even know what to make for dinner, if, I just, it's a different scenario, but I wish, I mean, I know I don't have a time machine, but boy, wish I did.
Yeah, I was the same, I was former FEMA contractor, right, through Homeland Security, all that stuff. Worked in New Orleans after Katrina, we did disaster recovery work, but during that time, all the reading I ever did were spec sheets. All the writing I ever did were spec sheets, stuff like that, and, it pulled me away from, like, all the reading I normally did, and, so, yeah, I kinda know where that comes from because during that time too, um, I don't know, probably a good 5 or 6 years after 9/11 because we were a FEMA contractor before 9/11, and then we got rolled into Homeland Security after 9/11, and, for about 5 years after that, I was kind of like I knew, about the surveillance stuff, the Patriot Act, whatever, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, "Courts are not gonna let this go through," right? And the Supreme Court did struck down some parts of the Patriot Act, other courts did too, but it wasn't struck down like we wanted it to be struck down. And, I thought for sure there's no way judges are just gonna let these people surveil without warrants or with just some flimsy probable cause or whatever, and sure enough, they did. And that, it wasn't until 2014, I had a stroke, I couldn't work anymore, so I'm, like, paying attention, I'm reading more again, I'm doing all these things, and I'm just like, "Wow. Yeah, this is how far we've come." And, for so long, so many people warned us about Homeland Security. You had Jesse Ventura doing these documentaries about these FEMA detention centers, right? That they thought for sure FEMA was gonna start rounding up American citizens, and then turns out those detention centers were for migrants, and then all that conversation went away. But you heard, like, libertarian militia, all kinds of far right militia talking about how we need to get rid of DHS that has too much power. All for 2 decades we heard them say this. And now you're
It's true.
seeing that power on the street You're seeing how easily they surveil people, and if there's one thing the Trump administration is good at is exposing all kinds of stuff through outright incompetence, and that's kinda what they're doing right now, exposing what ICE's powers are, how much power DHS has, and, the rest of the country is starting to see it, and I just it blows my mind, and again, another horrifying fact that these militias are silent all of a sudden, and it goes to show that all these allegations of them being racist and then trying to deny it just kinda prove themselves right now. They just
Yeah,
prove themselves to be racist because they don't care that the government is using these powers against immigrants or, liberals or woke whatever people protesting. But when they come for them, as they have so many times before, I mean, it's not like the feds haven't shot some right winger in the back before. It's not like they didn't burn down Waco. You know what I mean? All
yeah,
these right wingers and these that's the same scenario, the Waco thing. It's all just a big expansion of that same type of, attitude in our federal government about having this power over the people. And it really is a shame that, yeah, they're gonna revolt against the government for Trump and try to, invade Congress, but they're gonna let the feds go out in the street and shoot women in the face and kidnap people off the street, citizen or not, they don't care, and, they're just all frauds. Yeah, I mean, they are. They're frauds, and that's all there is to it. It's just, you thought they say they're there to fight tyranny, and tyranny's at our door. Where are they? They're sitting at home in their lazy boy.
yeah, or they're hired by ICE.
Well,
Um,
yeah, that too. I mean, that's a good point. Most of these guys in these militias are cops. So
yeah, yeah, I mean, like, well, I heard I don't know who the content creator was, and I always feel bad about that, and it's not like I'm trying to be disrespectful, it's just that I read a lot, a lot, a
mhm,
lot, and so, like, on Substack, off Substack, and so it all just kinda goes in the brain soup. But, like, someone said, and if you're on here, please out yourself, but, said that Donald Trump was creating a jobs program for white supremacists through ICE. And that really sent me because I was like, "Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah,
what it is. Yeah,
yeah," and I just thought, "Well, damn." It was just that, because people will talk about, "Oh my god, well, the economy is like shit," and that, and yeah, it absolutely is. Um, but it's certainly not for these people who are being paid to abduct,
right,
their neighbors, and, although I did see another piece that said that the $50,000 sign-on bonus was in itself like a scam, that you could only get that if, you know, there was some sort of delay, etcetera, and I'm not sitting here feeling bad for
right,
people joining ICE at this time at all, but I do know, and this is the thing that just, uh I don't know what the word is, but, I guess the part that gets me is, like, these people are gonna get fucked over too. These people who, for whatever reasons, and I think that the reason is racism, but I think that they're gonna get screwed over too because there's something that we know about Donald Trump, and it's that he always screws over the help, and ICE is absolutely the help.
yeah,
Um and I think if they think that those numbers are all if they're always gonna have that job or whatever, no, like, he's trying to subdue the population, he's gonna screw people over in relation to whatever he's promised them, and then he's gonna, like, fire their asses after he's decided that his control is consolidated. I mean, that is what is gonna happen after they've and I just wish sometimes that, people, I mean, it's hard because pop culture has spent, because it's all owned by oligarchs, most of it, we've just spent so much time idolizing rich white men, even with, like, The Apprentice bullshit, right? Even though Donald Trump was actually, like, uh, bankrupt at that time and actually failing in business at that time. But I just feel like, if we had just a little bit more suspicion for rich white dudes, I think people could foresee this. I mean, like, and I just, and I know that that, you know, a lot of, not a lot, well, many, but not all, of, poor white people see themselves as temporarily embarrassed billionaires, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and but it's just, I don't know, I just it's one of those things where it's like, if you don't think that this man isn't gonna screw you over too, I mean,
Right. I mean, he pulled healthcare out from under everybody. He pulled food stamps out from under a lot of people. You know, he left a lot of poor white people out in the cold just like he did everybody else. And the sad thing is, you know, a lot of white people will accept that. They're like, "Oh, that's just collateral damage. As long as black people or Latinos or whoever are suffering more, then it's justifiable." Um, but I think this time around it might be a little different because I think poor white people were directly impacted really fast. I mean, in under a year, they lost a lot. Um, so I don't, you know, that may start opening some eyes. I don't know, but at the end of the day, for a lot of people, it's you know, if they can't get past their hate, it's just gonna continue that way. You know, and you know, to touch on like the people that work at ICE, you know, no good people don't go to work at ICE. You know what I mean? I
yeah, dude.
have a hard time believing anybody with a good heart signs up to hunt other humans. I mean, period.
Yeah,
For whatever reason. I mean, you're not they know they're not hunting down millions of murderers. You know, they know that these guys aren't you know, the vast majority of people with prior convictions that ICE has taken in, they have convictions for traffic violations. And this is according to ICE's own data. And it's just absurd to think that, you know, I've seen lawmakers say, you know, some ICE agents are really good people. And I'm like, anybody who signs up for ICE is not good people. I don't get it. And, you know, they, with the money that they're putting into all this, there's already been an economy behind but behind deportations, right? You have
right, in prisons.
yeah, all the prisons, you have the jobs, you have border patrol, you have ICE, you have customs and border protection, all these other things. Um, and you have this economy that's built there. And what they're doing is they're fueling more money into that economy to make it even harder to get rid of later. Because, you know, what do you tell, I don't know, 100,000 people that are employed in this industry or 200,000 people, you know, we're not doing it this way anymore. Piss off. You know, I wouldn't feel bad. Honestly, I wouldn't. But, you know, that there's economic factors there that people take into consideration. And, you know, when a lot of people, this also plays into why a lot of Latinos end up working for Border Patrol. It's a way out of poverty. It's like the military. You know, they prey on poor people and proximity. You have Latinos everywhere. Convince them that, you know, these guys crossing the border are not like me. They're not like us, you know, blah, blah, blah. And there you go. 80 grand a year. You take home the truck, free uniforms, free healthcare, all this stuff. And, you know, it's a pretty easy sell, you know, to be honest. You know, when people you approach people that are living in poverty and that's their way out, you know, that's gonna be appealing on its own. So, yeah, there's a lot of factors that play into this whole mass deportation economy, and it's kind of just scary that you see all these corporations that are just jumping through hoops to become a part of it, and they're willing to exploit the inhumanity, you know, the human rights violations, the deaths, the violence in our streets just to make a buck. And
Yeah.
money's more important than life, and that's what it boils down to. It's so nuts to see.
Yeah, it absolutely is, especially when people, like, understand. I mean, I was just talking about this today with a friend, and it's like, what is so absurd about all of it is that money is literally a fiction that we all collectively buy into. I mean,
Right.
like, saying that right now. Like, I'm not saying that people do not have tangible houses that they're sitting on, but, like, as my friend, Ia, said on a call with me earlier today, you know, when you look at $100 bill, It's that you believe that it is $100 that you are. I mean, it's not like, it's not. And so that's the part that's so frustrating, is that they're literally doing it for fucking fiction too. And I'm not saying that money doesn't buy food, money doesn't buy housing and all that. Like, I get that. But when you look at corporate, especially when I think about the fact that, Jeff Bezos has sold his sort of logistics situation and is using AWS and is using the Ring cameras and all of this stuff to aid policing. When I think about the fact that Meta is used its facial recognition from a platform where people were trusting this company to not weaponize what they were putting online and saying, here, we're going to do a facial recognition, and here we're. So it's just the amount of evil. And I think, and I say evil, and not in a way to make people monstrous. I think that evil is very human. It's when you turn people into things and you look at them as obstacles for what's in your way. That's like the textbook definition of evil. I think that there are people who think that equate evilness with demonic, but I think Hannah Arendt was right about the banality of evil. And it really just means, oh, like, you're in my way. Oh, it's like another dollar, you
Right.
know? And it's hard, I think, for people to really. It's hard for me to grasp that someone would do anything
Right.
for, um, to hurt another person for money. I can't, it makes me sick. Uh,
Yeah, it blows me away too. I mean, it really is kind of disgusting because you look at Iraq, right? That was for oil.
mhm.
2 million people were killed and 4 million displaced or something like that. The numbers were just outrageous. And you see what's happening in Venezuela right now, and you can easily see numbers like that again, and that's scary to think about. The US isn't gonna just walk in and take a place like Venezuela with mountains and jungles and all this stuff, and, they have all kinds of revolutionary forces and the Sandinistas in the jungles, and you know what I mean? It's gonna be Vietnam all over again. So,
Right,
like, the way foreign policy is being handled right now is extremely dangerous because of that. Even just the talk about Greenland. Whether, I really don't think I don't know how serious to take it, but just the language can trigger just an international incident overnight, and they're just careless about it. And it's because they don't care about the human lives that it may cost, because it's not them, it's not their kids.
right.
Like, I kept seeing that was one of the things that irritated me too after Maduro was kidnapped. I kept seeing a lot of Venezuelans from, like, overseas and stuff like that. "Yeah, the US needs to go in and invade Venezuela." I'm like, "No, dude. Those are our tax dollars, our kids. If you wanna fight a war in Venezuela, you go fight the war in Venezuela." I have nieces and nephews that are military. I have a nephew who just joined the Marine Corps. Don't ask me why, it's not my part of the family, but just joined the Marine Corps, um, a few months ago. I'm like, "No, dude. You're not gonna sit here and tell me that we should invade." And a lot of people argued with me about, "Yeah, we should be willing to send our kids." I'm like, "No, you should be willing to go fight that. I don't wanna fight that war." And I'm so against war in every sense, but when people come out like that, I'm just like, "No, dude, don't start trying to convince me that I should send my kids to war for some internal problem in another country. It's none of our business." You know what I mean? Internal problems are none of our business. And if we hadn't meddled in that country, if we hadn't sanctioned them to the teeth and caused this mass migration event, they wouldn't be in the situation they're down there. So,
Yeah, yeah, and
don't convince me that I gotta send my kids to war after we just starved the country for the last, I don't know, 10 years. It's ridiculous.
yeah. Yeah, I think that that's another piece of gaslighting, because people will say stuff like, "And Maduro, like, mismanaged his country." It's like, do you not understand sanctions? Like, what
Right.
they are? Do you? Um, I just I do find that unless there is a willingness for, independent journalism, like, I feel like the only, places that I've seen, at least in the before times, really, focusing on this stuff were places like Democracy Now, ProPublica. How long have you been doing journalism?
I started taking journalism courses probably around 2011. Just because I wanted to start writing, publicly instead of just like reports that weren't online and stuff. I just wanted to get a good grip on how, it's done and stuff like that. And, by 2014, after I had the stroke, I was just like, well, I learned this new thing. Let's do that. And, here I am. I tried working, doing some, mainstream media type stuff. I know a lot of people in mainstream media that are really good people, but, just the whole culture and the environment and not having a say over the final product all the time, really have issues with that, and I did freelance work for some legacy media. And, at one time, this was a real turnoff. It was during the last Trump administration. I think it was 2nd or 3rd year in, and I did a story on immigration, and they kicked it back and asked me if I would write about something else because immigration was played out. And I was like, "Uh,
Wow.
no, 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 no. Immigration is not played out. It's headed down a very dark road," and they just weren't having it. And I was like, "Alright then." So I published it myself, and the article took the hell off, and I'm like, "Alright, so that's what I'm doing. I'm doing this."
Yeah.
Because yeah, and then I've just been independent ever since. I do freelance work for, like, Unicorn Riot, for Orinoco Tribune in Venezuela. I've done some stuff. Had a couple articles published in Cuba. All my work at Latino Rebels is in the Library of Congress. I think that's pretty freaking cool. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so, yeah, I mean, I don't know, there's probably close to 1,000 articles out there, about 100 of them Library of Congress. I mean, I'm not exactly making money hand over fist or anything like that, but I feel pretty good about, where I've been, what I've been through and where I'm going. And yeah, I enjoy it. It's fun. I really do. I think the State Department cut me off, but, we'll find out soon enough.
Yeah. Well, I want to say with my whole chest, fuck the State Department right now.
Yeah,
And just
right.
in the sense that I mean, like it just this as somebody who has studied white Christian nationalism for a very long time, I am just horrified to see white Christian nationalists and Christian nationalists who are cozying up to white supremacy culture, whether or not they are white, that are just cozying up to this. And I have been studying them for since 2010, officially. A little bit before that as well, but I had been studying them when they thought that nobody was looking. And the shit that they say is not, so if people are out there thinking, "Oh, well, these are just spicy Christians." They're not actually
Right,
Christians. They use, and I mean this in the sense that I have been told by a friend who is a pastor to say that they do not, uh, they're not aligned with the gospel, is a better way of saying it, instead of saying they're not Christian. To say they don't practice the gospel, they don't believe it. So it's like, but that's basically another way of saying they're not Christian, frankly. If
right.
I, so but they're really just using the trappings of cherry picked Christianity to deify, toxic white masculinity that is abusive and that is rife with,
Right,
you know, uh, not, rife with hate crimes of all kinds, rife with domestic abuse and childhood sexual assault. I mean, the Venn diagram between Christian nationalism and childhood predation is like a full fucking circle.
right.
And so the thing that really scares me is that anytime you mix some highly ideological brand of ethno nationalism with religiosity, what you get is genocide. And that is
Absolutely.
very scary. It's very scary to me, especially when I hear the stuff that, I've read the reports even before Trump got into office from the Lemkin Institute for Human Protection and Genocide Prevention. When they're talking about flagging both immigrants and trans people is like very high on the list for
Mhm.
genocide. And and I mean they're like constantly like updating stuff and being like, hey, hey, hey. And it worries me here. I know this is another thing that you mentioned in a different context when you were talking about, when you were talking about, I believe you were talking about Venezuela, but you were like, they don't want a civil war. They don't want this. And I
Right.
think about the US right now, and I see how casually people who are not on the menu, are, bantering around, Civil War talk. And as we were talking about before we got on this call, like people standing out on the streets with like semi-automatic rifles or pistols and just being like, "What? I'm protecting my community." And I wish that I could tell them, "You do not understand who white Christian nationalists are. You do not understand that they are actually itching to annihilate a very large portion of the population, and giving them any pretext is irresponsible, you know? I too, any kind of war, I don't want it, but I think that because in the US there has not really been a war on U.S. soil for quite some time. But I think that people are their notions of war. Many people who are talking tough come from, being Civil War buffs, and like just cosplaying that bullshit, or just being deeply into like war movies or this kind of shit or Call of Duty. And what they're not thinking about is things like, who are the highest casualties of war? And as it turns out, it's children. It's people who are elderly.
Okay.
It is people who are vulnerable. When we're talking about civil war situations, or any other kind of war, there is no fucking place for people to go. And then I hear some people talking about, well, if war breaks out, I'll just send my kids somewhere else. And I'm just like, boo, where are you going to send your children? Please
Right.
tell me right now, when we are ripping up any kind of agreement, like we are threatening Canada, we are threatening the EU. So I'm just super duper curious
Mexico.
where you're going to send your family. Like, where
Right.
are you going to go,
Right.
honey?
Right. Right, and it's not like they're just gonna open the border for you, right? Look at how we've been treating people at the border. So, there's gonna be some reluctance there too. Excuse me. But, to go back to the white Christian nationalism thing, that's what all this is, right? And that's what it's always been.
Mhm.
Manifest destiny, divine providence to colonize the Americas and slaughter the indigenous people. And when indigenous people fought back, it was them that were the savages. You
Right.
know, all of that is playing out right now, like in Latin America again. And it's again Christian nationalism. What's playing out in our streets is Christian nationalism.
Mhm.
It's all the same thing. That's how it all interconnects. Police brutality, mass incarceration, all these things are that white Christian nationalism. And when you see these people coming out on the streets and there's all this talk about the Black Panthers making a comeback, this is why the Black Panthers existed in the first place. This is why they armed themselves to protect their communities, to keep the cops out, to stop brutalizing their women, their children, throwing their men in jail. Um, you know, that that's the inevitable outcome in this country because our government has a history of overstepping. The LA riots were because of government overstepping, police brutality in LA, that triggered the riots. Like it's all provoked by the same, hate to say it, the same white man every time.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what's happening now on our streets. So when I see the guy in Minnesota standing there with an AR-15, and he said, "This is my block. These are my people." You know, I'm I'm okay with that. You have to maintain a defensive position, okay? As a gun owner, right? And I like to go to the gun range. I took the courses and I learned all the things to be able to carry concealed if I ever need to. I rarely ever do, but because I'm not paranoid like that. But I am in Texas, so I'm surrounded by people with guns, and I want to have guns too. Um, I see that dude, and as long as you maintain a defensive position, don't raise your weapon, don't threaten anybody. He was doing it the right way. He's just standing there talking to people, being chill, not making eye contact or directing his attention at ICE agents. He's just focused on the people around him. That's a smart move. I saw the black guy. I think it was a couple, but the black guy who had an AR-15 sitting on the trunk of his car. same scenario, maintain a defensive position. You let them know that, look, you're going to come over here and there might be some issues. They're not going to come over there. And that's what that is. It's a deterrent in a sense, like, like nuclear weapons are a deterrent. Nobody wants to pull the trigger because if you do, it's certain death. Um, and in some instances, I hate to say it, in this society, in our society, it's sometimes necessary to do what the Black Panthers have done and to see what we're seeing today. What worries me is that uh, it could be a recipe for disaster. It's just like the Greenland talk. One false word, one wrong move. You know what I mean? It's just too tense of a situation in some cases, and you have to be aware of that. You have to be able to understand somebody's conduct. Maybe they're getting a little ramped up, a little amped up, and they're armed. You probably don't want to be messing around too much. Nobody wants to get shot at, and nobody wants to pull a trigger. That I assure you, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. You know,
Yeah, and that's the part that worries me. I'm coming at this from, like, a different angle of, I actually get incandescent with rage when I see people out there with guns, and
yeah,
part of the reason, and I am not saying don't be a personal gun owner, but I have a different take on this, which is because I understand that white Christian nationalists have for years wanted to create a white ethno state in the United States. I guess, as someone who, like, studies, how genocides unfold, all these types of things, and when I think about the fact that clearly these white Christian nationalists who are now backed by the feds are have all of it, you do not want to even tiptoe onto a battlefield or be manipulated onto a battlefield where you're going to be annihilated.
right.
And the fact of the matter is that you're right, it could be catastrophic. So in that situation, I'm like, how about you keep your guns at home? What I would really love to see are truly, instead of a lot, and I mean no disrespect, so please hear me when I say this, but I have seen a lot of veterans with podcasts, and good for you on your podcasts. I would like to see veterans who are unarmed, wearing whatever, I want them to be out there being a protective force in their neighborhood with vests, being like, "Hey, I'm here for my community. You want to step to me, that's fine." But being unarmed, I think, to me, I feel like could be very, very powerful. But my
Right.
concern is that when you bring a gun to this kind of situation, it is like lighting a match in a tinderbox. And the thing is that the first people who are going to go up in flames are not the assholes out there with AR-15s. It's going to be people like me. It's going to be a lot of vulnerable immigrants. That is who it is going to be, and that is the
Right.
thing that really irritates me because I think that, and I don't mean any disrespect to men. I'm married to a trans man, but like this is the thing I know is that when you are somebody for whom the system has tended to work, in one way or another, and you get mad that the system is not working for you, and you think, especially, and I'll say this with the case with white men, and they're like, "Oh, bring out the guns," and it's like you haven't tried to do community organizing, you haven't
Right.
tried to put in real systems of support. It is like bringing a chainsaw to a surgery theater, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
just like, the
Yeah.
fuck, man. And so that's the part that just, like, is sending me because it's like there are options and going, signaling that you are, just individuals signaling, "Oh, yeah, I'm like the first civilian who fires a shot anywhere near ICE is going to guarantee mass atrocities."
Even if
And
it's
that's the part.
a misfire could trigger an event, and that's the scary part because those happen. If you have
Yeah,
an arm, yeah, and that's another thing. Like, you shouldn't be walking around with the thing loaded with one in the clip or none of that. You know what I mean? It's not you're not in that situation, and that's
right.
how misfires happen, and that's how people die, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
I'm a firm believer in that there's no such thing as a gun accident because you have to be a dumbass to be involved in one. Like, if you're not trained to have a handgun or anything like that, you shouldn't have one. And if yeah, I'm not a believer in accidents. Like, guns are supposed to be secure. I have a big old gun safe. You know what I mean? Like, I don't. You just there are things you need to do to be a responsible gun owner, and I know a lot of people that don't like guns, but they have them because it's Texas, and they keep it locked up. And that's all there is to it. And it's just, yeah. I'm like I said. If the dude who said this is my block, I'm protecting my people, accidentally pops one off. That could be, I mean, they fire at him, some miss, some bullets go into houses, into cars, the crossfire. That's where most casualties happen, in crossfire. So, and especially in a residential area, like, it's just, yeah, I
Which is why
get,
yeah.
I, I get where they're coming from. I really do understand the situation. Um, Yeah, it's just, yeah, very volatile, very volatile. Like, it scares me.
Right. It scares me too, and I mean, that's the thing is that, like, I don't think that they're understanding about the argument that I mean, I get that they probably do understand the argument that they're making with the gun, but I think that they're probably still so in their amygdala that they're not thinking about, "Oh, there are other people around me who
Right.
might also be impacted by my uncareful footprint here." And I just that's the part that is just really sending me also, and I'm just saying this from the perspective of somebody, um, uh, who understands a little bit about how pro-democracy movements collapse. When armed conflict becomes part of the attempt to remove a totalitarian regime, what ends up happening as soon as that kind of violence enters the fore is that pro-democracy movements collapse and people get stuck under totalitarian regimes for decades,
Mhm.
decades. And it's like, so for me, it's like, why would you even want to and I get it that that's not information that we're all sitting here with. And the reason and also in a pro-democracy sort of movement, when you've got, like, something like a I don't know, anywhere from a 50 to 70% chance of succeeding, right, when you
Right.
organize together, but the moment that there is violence, that success rate drops down to 5%. And I don't think that these people really understand that because I think that they're moving and I know that there's this high talk about, how women and femmes and trans people and LGBTQ people are like, the weaker sexes, but like I don't get in my feelings and go outside with a gun and threaten people who
Right.
could annihilate me and my neighborhood. And I am not saying anything about personal gun ownership and all of that. I mean, I grew up in a situation with a my father was a Green Beret,
Mhm.
and he was very anti-gun. He was like, no, he wouldn't. We were not even allowed to have squirt guns in the house
Yeah.
and I think and I think in part of that is because he, he was in Cambodia, and he was
Right.
there for two different tours, enough to get 2 R&Rs in Australia, which he talked about on loop. But my point here is that, like, I know he saw shit that horrified him because he would wake up screaming every night. And I don't think that people really grasp that, like, uh I mean, I just wish people understood that Christian nationalists actually do want to kill you.
Yeah.
Like, that should be obvious with the things that Russ Vought are doing, that he absolutely wants to kill a whole bunch of people, right? Taking away SNAP, hiring a fucking, I don't this is no shade on addiction. I understand that addiction is complicated, but hiring a former heroin addict as the Secretary of Human Health and Services. I mean, like all of these choices are intentionally. Every bit of what is happening is intentionally designed to kill a whole bunch of people, right? But I'm feeling really, really worried in this moment because I think that I get that people are feeling desperate. Like I do. And I do not want to see this turn into a situation. I just and that's the thing. I think people talk really tough until they realize, oh shit, my kids have nowhere to go or I don't know what to do with my neighbor or with my partner who is critically ill. The answer is they're going to die if it breaks
Yeah.
if it breaks into a civil war. you are looking at a situation where many people that you love, I mean, even with the world wars that we've had, right? I mean, people lost entire families. That's the whole reason why allegedly there was the attempt at like some sort of alliance. Now, did that work? Did that work for anyone in the global South? Absolutely fucking not, right? It was
Right.
just like it was clearly still rooted in white supremacy, right? I'm not saying that, I have no, I know sometimes, Heather Cox Richardson, kind of talks about it as if it was like this order that applied to everybody, but it never applied to the countries that get included in the alleged global South. I mean, I think that that's a terminology that is loosey goosey, right? Because I think that even within the United States, we could talk about some of the criteria that are used for the alleged global South, and we can find it also in our own country. So it's not like it's not the greatest term, but you get what I'm putting down.
Yeah, I think, a lot of what we see in this country with people going, quick to go to their guns when they're talking about the government or tyrannies, the we romanticize, the Revolutionary War and the Civil War and the War of 1812 and I don't know what there is to romanticize about 500,000 people dying in the Civil War, but both sides did it, both sides romanticize it, and there's nothing romantic about it. We've romanticized all kinds of war. We even, whitewashed the Vietnam War where we got our asses kicked. Um,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So, and like how many we lost so many people in Vietnam and damaged so many more, mentally and people came back with missing limbs and for what? For what, right? Because we wanted to rid Vietnam of communism? Is that why is that our business? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, I
let them
agree.
let them govern themselves and let's worry about us, okay? Like, it's not really our business, but it's just so crazy to just think that and again, like, the guy defending his neighborhood, his block, I get why he's doing that. I get why he felt compelled to do it, but it's all, what ICE is doing is romanticizing, slave patrols and all the stuff pre-civil rights, pre the Civil Rights Act, and how we treated black people and just they're just basically Klansmen, right? Like you talk about this where, these people aren't really Christian, right? That's what they are. That's their version of Christianity is Klan Christianity. And, like, I call most of the people these days, especially in Trump's White House, clean cut Klansmen with 3 Ks because that's
Mhm.
what they've become, right? They don't have to wear a robe anymore. They just put on their $1,000 suit, get on TV with a grin on their face as they tell you they're robbing you blind. I don't give a damn how and the more you freak out about it, the harder they laugh. Like, they get off on just misery, on creating misery, on they've been mocking the 32 Cubans they killed in Venezuela. They won't tell you that they blew up a barracks while they were asleep, you know? And yet here they are mocking them and making fun of them, and I'm like, "You know what, dude? You just why is that funny? Why is that funny?"
Well, it's
And
not. Yeah. It's
they
not
just
funny.
enjoy it.
Yeah. 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 And it's one of those things where, again, if you want to defend and protect your communities, I wish that people understood. And I was reading this last night. I don't know if I've been doing a lot of lives recently, but I've been doing an evening pro democracy reading Rainbow, and I'm reading Gene Sharp. And one of the things that he says, which I really appreciated, he talked about nonviolent civil resistance, not as passivity, but as like that nonviolent civil resistance is actually developed as a tool of responding to a war where you know that you are outgunned. And one of the things that I really appreciated that what he said was, if you take up guns in a situation like that and you shoot at somebody or you do something like this, that you're really just targeting an avatar of the regime's power, but that civil resistance can erode the entire base out from under it and do so with less depth. So I am not here under any hippy dippy illusion that
Right.
people are not going to die. People are going to die. What I am invested in is like, could we have less death, please? Because I think sometimes people think, well, if I take out a gun, it's a fuck around and find out. But one of the things that I have seen, because I've seen a lot of veterans, like so many veterans, and a lot of the nonviolence trainings that I've done, like I cannot tell you how many veterans are in that. And they said the same thing. Please tell your neighbors you do not bring guns to a pew pew, or you don't bring guns to a drone fight. And they're like, you need to understand this, that if you have this romanticized notion that you are going to protect your community with guns, I want you to think about Christy Gnome's one of us, all of you, and
You
understand that what happened in Palestine was just a dry run for what they intended to roll out on everywhere else. And I don't think that people realize that there are crazy motherfuckers who are part of the federal government right now that would not even fucking blink to drone the shit out of Minneapolis or anywhere else if one of theirs and in that case you don't get to choose who lives and dies in that situation, but because your dumbass brought a gun to a drone fight, because this is what we're in. We're in a drone fight kind of situation. And that's the
right.
part. Yeah, so I mean, like, it really struck me to see, so many veterans who were in this sort of nonviolent civilian, training, and they were like, Please tell your neighbors, like, this is not you're not going to see conventional warfare. That is not what is going to happen. They're tracking you with your fucking phones. If you think you're not being surveilled now, you're fucking wrong. And they will absolutely drone the shit out of people. And they keep on talking about it. They're saying, we have, semi-autonomous drones, we have all this. And they can so I just really want people to process that, because I get it that people are angry and people are in their feelings, for all good reasons, and they want to protect their communities, but like some strategy is necessary, and like really understanding the field. And these people are itching to use their drones on people that they see as un-American, and they see anybody in a blue state
Right,
just rip
and
on.
they've been loosening the meaning of what is and isn't a terrorist, right? And terrorist is the key signifier for drone strikes. And while the Patriot Act specifically mentions Al Qaeda, it mentions Afghanistan, the Taliban, it's specifically used in those scenarios. The Trump administration is arguing that they have the right to use that outside of those boundaries, which is what they're justifying the boat strikes with. And, they classify Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations. And we have, a striker brigade at the border right now. And I reported on this earlier this year or last year. And February was when Hegseth was looking for the authority to sign off on drone strikes, which is normally left up to the president. President's supposed to sign off on drone strikes. Well, under Trump, Hegseth can.
Great.
And then, I said in February that we're probably a really long way from this, but I feel like they're building towards being able to drone strike migrants at the border. Well, since we've been blowing up these boats, I don't feel like we're so far away from that anymore. We
Yeah.
already have, again, a striker brigade, which is a fast reaction force at the border that's supposedly watching for migrants, but they have surveillance capability, they have drone capability, they have all kinds of that. They're an offensive brigade, and it's for that type of terrain. So, I mean, they're there for a reason. We're drone striking people for a reason. The NSPM 7 that basically says that if you were saying anything anti-Christian, anti-American, anti-Trump, basically, anything they disagree with, you could be labeled as a domestic terrorist. They did it to Renee Good.
Yeah,
They
they did.
used the presidential memorandum to classify her as a domestic terrorist after they shot her.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
yeah.
I mean, within minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that that is also kind of important for people to grasp, because like you know when you're talking about Christian nationalists, and if you have not actually read some of their private conversations, where for years they have been celebrating not only death, but talking about all of the other people that they would like to put to death, and in really gruesome ways, in case you're curious. But like literally, I had to stop after a while. I started really diving in 2015, and I had to tap in a friend of mine who is a white Christian, straight, cisgender, and he was like, "Dude, this is like really some tough stuff to read." And because it felt like it was like rotting my soul just to read the violent things that they said. But I guess my point is to people like this, um, especially when you have people like JD Vance who wants to fashion himself as like the first Christian nationalist dictator, right, post Trump. Um, they do not see us as human beings. They see us as furniture, and they would happily drone the shit and level Minneapolis or level Los Angeles
Yeah,
and be like, you know what, we can rebuild with our people. I mean, that is who these people are.
it's the
They
God
are
of
not, yeah, like so. That's the what? Yeah, the God.
God
Did you
of
say that? Yeah, yeah,
flat. We'll rebuild it, right? Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and it's like so like what I'm trying like I mean, and what our Palestinian neighbors try to tell us is they mean to roll this out on you. And I
mhm,
think that if we can understand that we're in a global techno-fascist sort of situation where we're not talking about constitutionality anymore. I mean, I'm somebody who I want everybody to vote, but I also believe that there will probably be Department of Homeland Security people at every fucking precinct, snatching people out of lines, doing exactly what they did to scare people and terrify people away from the polls. And I don't doubt that they won't act like any other dictatorship and try to rig the votes in many ways. I mean, the votes have been rigged in the United States through through poll taxes, through lynchings, through gerrymandering, and every other sort of formulation. We've
mhm,
been an anti-democratic country for a very long time. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like this is not like a one midterm or one presidential election away, and I don't think people understand that in personal dictatorships and in self coups, once you're there, you're playing for all the marbles. So if you think that they will not kill the enemy from within, we already saw that.
yeah,
And so you're saying the thing about droning at the borders. I think that we are also arriving at the time where uh, droning could happen,
right.
inside the United States. I think about so I have a friend who lives in Oregon, and they were telling me that there are drones were flying all over Oregon, like all over. And I just I'm not saying that there are not other reasons why they might be using drones, but I think that the threat is there, and it
Mm,
will take nothing to use that. And I mean, if you're and when you hire somebody who is, I don't know the clinical term for when you might, I don't know, but when you kill animals, it leads to kind of a psychopathic serial killer type
yeah,
mentality.
I don't know the term, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
Yeah, well, and I mean, I think when you look at Kristi Noem's Shark Eyes, that is actually a feature, not a bug, of people who engage in like who want to engage in mass atrocities. And when I tell you she will not blink, and killing you and your own, um, s- b- this is who white Christian nationalists are.
yeah,
You know? And I just really wish people knew that because I especially, some of my neighbors who are white, like, I really want them to, like, really grasp who white Christian nationalists are and that they absolutely have been wanting to kill a lot of Americans for a long, long time, and now they have the means to do it, and they are just looking for a pretext.
right.
It's just
And
yikes on hikes.
they're creating that pretext,
Yeah.
every single day, a little bit here, a little bit there, and you saw it, like I said, with Renee Good, you saw it with Kilmar Brego Garcia, you saw it with, several people, Mahmoud Khalil, they used their speech in a country that boasts its free speech, against them and labeled them basically domestic terrorists and, tried to deport them. They murdered one. They deported another one, to a torture prison where, Christy Nome went down there and taking
Oh,
pictures and smiling while people I mean, there's, like, inhumanity in the background, and she's just like you said, she would not blink an eye, and
no.
I'm 100% with you on that, she would not. I think when you start looking at it from that perspective, there are not many people in the administration who would blink an eye.
Right, right, and that's the thing, and I think that I'm not saying this, by the way, like, I'm saying all this stuff, and it sounds really scary, and I'm saying don't bring I personally am saying I'm not saying anything about the guns that you have at home for hunting
Right,
or for
right,
personal I'm not saying that, but, like, when we're talking about bringing those guns outside, you were literally creating pretext, and you're right,
right,
one simple accident, and I get it that people are like, "Oh, well, but in the past, this thing happened." But I think that I think that sometimes when people are scared, they reach for past models of, like, revolutionary examples, and they're not thinking about the present context and the present landscape as it exists and how the battlefield might have changed. And so for me, it's like, okay, we're in this fucked up situation where we are outgunned and we are being manipulated to play on their playfield so that they can annihilate us. What are our options? And the thing is, we have a lot of options. And I say that because one of the things that was really encouraging for me to understand is that when regimes do engage in violence, it hurts them.
right,
Because what happens is the people who might have been silent bystanders before suddenly come into the pro democracy movement are like, no, fuck that. And a lot of people defect, but the moment that someone on our side picks up a pew pew and decides to, play revolutionary, we're gonna have some real shit, and it's going to
right.
so it's tough. But I guess the thing is just that there are so many things that we're already doing and that we can still be doing that I think can erode the power, the base of support, from underneath of Trump. I think a lot of people think that to remove a dictator, you've gotta go straight to the top, but it's always been about knocking out pillars of support.
Right.
And I think there are credible ways to do that, but the moment that violence enters the fore, we are fucked 2 ways to Sunday. And
Yep.
it's tough for me because I understand people's anger, and, like, I don't share my private thoughts or my private prayers that someone might expire after one fatal Big Mac. I don't I don't share, you know I'm not I'm not telling you about my secret prayers to St. Jude, but what I am telling you is that, like, there I feel like I when I tell you that I get the anger, like, I get the anger, but my thing is alchemize that anger, recognize the battlefield that you were actually on instead of reaching to a nostalgic past in which the battlefield was much more simple. Consider the situation that you're in and plan accordingly. And it's tough because, I mean, it's not like we have an education to do this. We
Yeah, I
are,
mean,
yeah.
we do have tools though that, you think of Goebbels, right? The Nazi propagandist, and he said something about, you tell a lie long enough and everybody will start believing it. Goebbels
Mhm.
didn't have the internet to deal with, right? He didn't have, you know, I don't know, 100 million people speaking their mind every day in a place where another 100 million people can hear that. So I think that's one of the things that is working in our favor. And I think with I consider it a technological advantage, even with the Nazi problem on the internet. I think that, truth is our biggest weapon. I agree with you that, the minute you show up outside with guns, say an accidental misfire, another, situation like that, you're the bad guy automatically, right? The logic behind MLK's peaceful protest idea was, show them who the violent ones are. It's not us. And
Right.
and like you said, that's exactly how dictatorships and authoritarian policies and all that stuff start to lose their power. I think that the more we keep putting truth out there and enlightening minds and at least have them question things more, instead of just accepting, what CBS or ABC is telling you. Dig a little deeper, just a little bit past the surface, and you'll start seeing additional context that'll change the story. You know,
Yeah.
and I think that in this world, it's been so easy in the last year and all the years that I've written about ICE and all that stuff. I've seen so much information get out there about all the companies that are profiting off of it, all these things, and like in one way, I feel like, man, I worked my ass off. Look at all these other people getting this attention. But to me, the bigger thing is I'm looking around going, wow, everybody's talking about all these things that we've been needing to talk about. Like it's about time. And that outweighs anything else. I see this, conversations about Latin America. I see, the ICE thing, the DHS thing, all these conversations are happening, about immigration detention centers. And these are just really, really important. Unfortunately, we watched a record number of people die in detention centers last year, 4 so far already, and it's just January. Um, but I
And
mean,
those are the numbers that we know of.
right, that we know of. And that's the thing. When we talk about all these brutality cases with ICE and everything, and the death, it's what we know of. If anybody's seen Critical Incident: Death at the Border on HBO Max, Jen Budd is in that. Um, and it really shows you how Border Patrol's critical incident teams cover up crime scenes, and they go in there. I mean, they mop it up, they clean everything, and we saw it happen after they shot Renee Good. They
Yes,
moved,
yes.
they moved her body. They picked up bullet casings. They, mopped up as much as they could. And when you watch that documentary that's on HBO Max, they talked to some cops and they're like, yeah, we went to this scene where somebody was shot, but there was no scene. It was already cleaned up. And that critical incident team came and mopped it up. And there's no evidence behind. They can't charge anybody. There's no investigation to be had. And that's who these agencies are. Homeland Security and almost all the agencies underneath it, except for maybe Secret Service and the Coast Guard and FEMA, are all, cover up masters. They cover up everything they do. And they're largely unregulated, hardly any oversight. Oversight and detention centers for 2025 dropped 38%. So now there's even less oversight and people are dying everywhere. So yeah, that's just essentially a lawless organization. They found ways around the Fourth Amendment by buying private data from Amazon and Thomson Reuters, and they have our utility bills for 218 million people. Like, why does ICE or DHS need that? They don't, but they have it. 3 and 4 American citizens' driver's license information, they have it,
Mhm.
and it's all in their facial recognition databases. So, like, this is just full balls out surveillance in violation of, like, I don't know how many amendments at this point. Uh, and nobody does anything to stop it. And I honestly, we don't need DHS. We really don't. The Coast Guard can be the Coast Guard. Secret Service can go back to being Secret Service. FEMA can go be FEMA. Get rid of ICE, Border Patrol, DHS. Get rid of all of them. We don't need none of that stuff. Yeah, it's
I don't
just
think we do, yeah, I don't. I mean, am I correct in thinking and that initially what we had was INS and not DHS?
yeah. We had INS before ICE and
Yeah.
Homeland Security. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and,
And
Border Patrol was part of INS, and, basically, the U.S., Citizenship and Immigration Service, USCIS, is the new INS, but it's under Homeland Security, whereas before, INS was the primary agency, Immigration and Nationalization Services. So, yeah, they under Bush, they restructured everything and made everything so much more inefficient, and, created this massive surveillance network where all this data is collected and it's shared between all federal agencies, all local law enforcement agencies. Like your local police department has access to all the information Homeland Security, the FBI, and every other agency has on you. through what they call fusion centers. And it's a two-way street. You know, the FBI and every federal agency has access to all these other databases. So everything that Palantir's doing with ICE and everything that all these other Thomson Reuters, Booz Hamilton, or yeah, all of them, all that's accessible by everybody. So, you know, while everybody's focused on abolish ICE, they have too much power, this, that, and the other. We need to keep in mind that because of these fusion centers, your local cops have access to that information. So if you piss off a cop in your neighborhood, he can easily go and abuse of these systems is really, really high, by the way.
Mhm.
But yeah, he can go into that database, find dirt on you, build a profile on you, put fake information in there about you that might trigger a federal investigation. It's scary how easily that stuff can be manipulated. We watched them do it to kill Mara Brago Garcia. The
Right, you did.
false stuff in gang databases, fake stuff in gang databases. They used all that stuff to label him MS-13 and a terrorist and all these things, and none of it was true. And I
Right.
mean, they showed us how they do it.
Right, and I agree with you. Like, I think that if you were under the uh, uh, mass delusion that this is an aberration and
Right.
not this isn't a bug, it's a feature. And and I would also add that this is the case for anytime you piss off an institution that upholds power in some kind of way. It doesn't matter if you it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you do for your community. The moment that you step out of what serves white supremacy culture and you've stood up to it in some kind of way or you're in the crosshairs, they're going to invent a story whole cloth. And especially yeah, I mean, I feel like I think I heard someone say once that maybe recently someone from Ukraine said that they were thankful that the Russians were stupid in some kind of way on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And I feel like, yeah, I think I am also grateful that we are seeing um, the mask come off when it comes to not just DHS, not just ICE, but various like educational institutions that were just ready to not just slobber on the ring, but gargle someone's balls. I mean, they just like are like, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, let's do it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the fuck. Same thing with the media. They're like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like when do you? Just tell me what to do, daddy. Just like this really and I want people to understand that like you should have no nostalgic uh uh sort of view of any of these institutions, right? And this is what they were always going to do, in part because the people who are put in control of various institutions are literally put there to serve power, right? So it's just yeah, it's a fucked up moment, but I'm also somebody who fucking refuses to give up and to say, "Oh, our goose is cooked." I mean, that's one of the things that I think, and I know we've been talking for a minute, but um, I'll just sort of share my last piece, and I'll just ask you what you think about it. But one of the things that takes me off that I've seen, and this is that I've seen a lot of individuals um, who have not experienced friction with institutions of power and who are in this moment and they're saying, "That's it. This is done. Our goose is cooked. We're doomed. There's nothing that we can do." And every time I see that, and uh, I am committed to nonviolence, but sometimes I want to smack someone.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
'Cause I'm like, "Will you shut the fuck up and go take a walk?" Because the thing is that there's actually plenty that we can do. And if you are not somebody who is familiar with me and you're interested in learning things that you can do that are actually tangible, that are not about call your politicians and just peaceful protest harder, there are actual things that we can be doing that are very, very effective. And I find myself very, very pissed off at a number of individuals who are either just saying, "Oh, we're doomed. Our goose is cooked. There's nothing that we can do," and or, "Well, just wait for the midterms." And I'm like, bro, are you for real?
Yeah.
Like, what are your takes on this?
Well, I mean, we kinda saw it happen after, Trump's first term, and then when Biden got elected. There was a lot to be outraged about during Trump's first term,
Mm,
from immigration to the Black Lives Matter stuff. Like, I mean, there was a lot. But, when Biden came into office, all that stuff just kind of went away. And, there wasn't a lot of follow up. And a lot of Trump's policies, unfortunately, Biden kept them in place.
mm,
They had camps where they were detaining families for up to like 3 days that were outdoor along the border and, in the Southwest. There were, migrants that were abandoned in a snowstorm and Border Patrol refused to go rescue them that's part of their job. They were like they apparently they told Jen or somebody else that they didn't have four-wheel drive vehicles when the only thing they have is four-wheel drive vehicles, and they left them out there in the snowstorm. We saw a lot of this stuff with Biden. The Remain in Mexico policy stayed in place. It was called something else. I can't remember exactly what. But, they turned away 4.5 million people at the border. There was a lot of stuff that just kind of got swept under the rug. And, some of Biden's policies kind of opened the door for what Trump is doing now, unfortunately. Um, Not that Trump wouldn't have put those policies in place himself, but, essentially, with every administration, there's just another little step, and it's this incrementalism that's going the wrong way. And like, I don't know how much further you can go than Trump other than going full blown goose stepping Gestapo um,
mm.
right now. So, I have a hard time believing anybody's going to take another step after they just gave ICE 100 and whatever $1 billion. That's just ridiculous. And I don't know that we can roll any of this stuff back either. That's where I have a problem. I'm with you though, where I'm not in a sense. I'm not like there's no way we can't do anything, but you can always do something, right? Whether it's telling the truth, whether whatever it may be. But I mean, I can be cynical about stuff, and it's okay to be cynical sometimes because, like, when we see what they've been doing to Venezuela and Cuba and stuff, that's all age old stuff, policies that they've been in place for like 70 years that never worked, still don't work. They still use them. So it's kind of hard not to be cynical about that kind of stuff. But, I'm hopeful that maybe the midterms, we get some Democrat majority somewhere in there that can really start giving Trump hell. Um, hopefully the next presidential election, should we have one that's legitimate, because we'll probably have one, whether it's legitimate or not is the question. And if we can get some sort of rational leadership in there, I would hope some of this stuff gets rolled back. I would hope that ICE funding would get reappropriated for something more useful. Um, in a perfect world, I would love to see DHS gone and take that, I don't know, 20, 40, $60 billion we spent. I don't even know anymore. There's so many agencies with DHS, but take all the money we use from DHS for healthcare or something. We can abolish poverty with that. End homelessness. Like, it's an unnecessary agency. It's bloated, but there's a whole economy of corporations that are making a big buck off of it. So I don't know how you get rid of it. And I know I'm kind of rambling, but
No, no, no. I mean,
but
you're
it,
that's
it, it's,
legit.
I have hope that at some point we can start rolling some of this stuff back. But all the damage Trump has done in just 1 year so far, I think it's going to take a decade to recover from. With all
Oh,
the funding, cutting funding to all these federal agencies and changing the names of things, and ending all this money for USAID, leaving people starving all over the world. Like, it's our reputation is done. You know what I mean? Like, their incompetence exposed us for a paper tiger, and especially what's going on today at Davos in Europe. With the whole Greenland thing, it's ugly. It's ugly. You have Trump White House officials doing panel discussions talking about how, the Western Hemisphere, is basically it's the US's backyard and like basically the US needs to own this and it's in the world's best interest that the US has all this power so we can protect them. And you have all these
Right.
world leaders looking at like Scott Bessent like, are you stupid? Like, we don't need any of that. I don't know if they know that Europe could just call in our debts and really tank our economy overnight, but they can. China can
Yeah.
too. China could
Yeah, I mean,
collect and we're screwed.
yeah, I mean, I think I mean, if I'm being honest, when I look at the Bitcoin nonsense,
Yeah,
I worry to myself that they absolutely do know, and that so that they can roll in a new economy, that is, based on not only Bitcoin, but something that looks like social currency, and that does worry me, but I also, I still have for me, hope is not hope for me has teeth. Hope is a possum, man. Like, hope is
yeah,
it's a thing, like, so I maybe may shouldn't have used possum is the right word, but because I know that possums also play dead, but I was thinking about the hissing
yeah.
possum there. This scrappy little thing, and also resistant to rabies, as it turns out. The only, rabies-resistant marsupial in, North America, I believe.
Interesting.
Anyway,
I
I
did not
digress
know
on that. I digress on that fun animal fact, but, yeah, like, I think that you're and I also agree with you about, taking these, abolishing DHS, absolutely. I'd like to return to a time in which those organizations did not exist. I would also, like to have, the military budget cut in
yeah,
not even half, but I would like 75% of that military budget to go away because the whole reason why we have billionaires to begin with is because they've been getting fat on, corrupt contracts that come through the Pentagon because they haven't passed an audit in how many years?
it's
Um,
a long time. Yeah,
yeah, and to wit, one of the things that I was reading that really struck me, the UN was talking about how healthcare is a matter of national security. They were talking about Palestine and they were talking about hospitals and all of this. And I was just thinking about the United States and how this country is run to keep people from access to healthcare, from access to stable housing, from access to food, and also from access to like education free of AK-47s and so forth
yeah,
coming in schools, which is intentional. If you think that the reason why there hasn't been any gun legislation, in my opinion, is because these Christian nationalists want people who are attending public schools terrorized because they hate the idea of black and brown children learning alongside white children and a whole rainbow of people of different orientations and gender identities and abilities. And they don't want that. They don't want their kids to co regulate with other kids. And so they're like, yeah, absolutely. We will make sure that these kids and these teachers live in abject terror because we absolutely do not want them learning along. But so what I'm trying to say is that there has been a project in the United States to keep the people oppressed and in trauma. And it has been for decades, and I am fucking done with it, So my hope comes from a place of alchemized rage. It's not naive. I know exactly where we are, but I mean, I want, I would like to, even if I don't expect to live in a world in which I get to see the fruits of that labor, but I would like to not stick my head in the sand and leave my sib kids and my students and their kids in a situation where they don't have any fucking rights anymore,
right,
that they're
right.
living in some freedom city, where it's a basically revisited white nationalist company store. I don't want that for young people. I don't want that for any of us, but I think it's down to the rest of us to, one, recognize our emotions, learn how to alchemize them in smart ways, and then fucking organize in a way that actually makes sense, and I know that the people in the US don't know how to really organize in this context, but we need to learn. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I see, I see a lot of hope too, and like, talking to, I don't know if you know of Elizabeth Rabin on here on Substack. She's you know, retired college professor from in Venezuela. She lives in Caracas. And like, you talk to her and, given their situation, what just happened and all this stuff and the shock of everything and all that. And, you still hear hope and positivity and, you know, they're looking forward to, reforms in their government and stuff like that. And, you see hope in situations that are worse than ours and in a lot of ways. Um, I find a little peace in that, a little solace in that because, there are worse situations out there and, people are still smiling. People are still trying to get through. People are still trying to, you know, make it through one day at a time. And, I see a lot of positivity coming out of some of the worst places in the world, the worst situations. And, that's where my hope lies, and I have a 3 and a 5-year-old grandkids, a boy and a girl, and, like, I worry about them. My kids are in their 20s, I worry about them. My parents are in their 70s, my dad's 91, I worry about them because every one of us are vulnerable. There isn't a
Yeah,
single group in my family, we're Cuban, we're Jamaican, Colombian, like, most everybody's immigrants. We're, like, first generation Americans, me and my brothers are. And, all my cousins are immigrants and all that stuff, and, like, all of us are vulnerable, and it's just so scary, especially for, like, my parents, my dad who's 91, God forbid they come knocking on his door, my stepmom who's in her 80s who's, you know, battling Alzheimer's and stuff, God forbid, like, I wouldn't know what to do. I'm 1,500 miles away from them, and
mm,
that's the kinda shit that scares me, but at the end of the day, I talked to my dad and, he's 91, he's still going, he's still a smart ass, he's not worried, he don't give a damn, like, so, like, every time I talk to I call him and I'm all worried and stuff, but then when I'm done, I'm like, "Ah, whatever." And, like, I try to tell him how I feel, like I just told you. He's like, "Ah, don't worry about that shit. Don't even worry about it." I'm like, "Alright, man." He's like, "I live my life. I'm not worried about shit." I'm like, "Alright, you say so, bro." But yeah, it's hard to think that, there isn't a single demographic in my family or demographic that I know of, even like the Indian family down the street, like, we're all vulnerable, and,
yeah,
and we still hang out though, we hang out in the front yard, we talk, and, you have we're kinda suburbia, so, you have those white folks who won't make eye contact with you if you're not white folks. But we'll be out in the
mhm.
front yard with the Indian family or my neighbor who's, like, super Christian. You could put a cape on that guy. He's, like, super nice, one of the nicest Christians ever, and, but yeah, we have some cool neighbors, we have some neighbors not so cool that are full-blown MAGA, and we just, we do our thing, they do their thing, they don't pay attention to us, we ignore them, and that's basically how it is. When a disaster happens like that freeze, we all come through for each other and all that stuff, but other than that, you stay on your side of the street, I wanna stay on my side of the street, and, we're good. But yeah, it's fun that even given the circumstances, we find ways to laugh, we find ways to have fun, we find ways to, tune out, unwind, and just, have conversations about whatever, even if it's watching football. We watched football last Sunday with some neighbors and stuff, and it was a good way to just shut everything off for about 3 hours, and that was fun. So, yeah, I mean, it's nice to see that, even a super Christian guy next door thinks this ICE stuff is messed up, he thinks it's all way overblown. I don't ask him who he voted for, he don't ask me. He's a nice enough guy, I'm not gonna bother him with that. He's got kids that my grandkids play with, they're good people. The neighbor across the street that had the MAGA sign after the election, that guy, we don't really talk too much, but it
Yeah.
sucks to be him because he's MAGA and he's got Latinos on one side, black family on the other side, Latinos across the street, mixed Latino black family across the street. We like to give him a hard time.
He likes to be a provocateur, it seems.
Well,
Isn't
he's
it?
just surrounded by a bunch of brown people, so I think it's funny.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's
God. Yeah, I feel in the spirit of hope. I think about my ex in-laws. So my ex-wife is from a Pentecostal holiness family. She's white. Her family is white, and they're Pentecostal holiness in the swamps of South Carolina. And, when, they first found out that, like, I was trans, non-binary, the first fucking thing they did is, like, vote for Trump the second time around when Biden won. 'Cause, the point is they went from referring to me as the devil come to rip the family apart to not only being like, "There's room in my heart for you. I'm sorry that I did not recognize you. Yes, we did vote for Trump this last time, and this is," and they were just like, "This is ridiculous, like, this is," they're realizing that, like, all the shit, and they are people who are definitely racist and who are definitely transphobic, who are definitely all those things, and they're being like, "Oh, shit," like,
yeah,
when it was just talk, that's one thing. But, I feel, I mean, this is the swamps of South Carolina, and we are talking about people that are deeply, deeply religious. We're talking about a dude who once said at the dinner table, "I'm more conservative than Bill O'Reilly," and I'm like, "That's a flex." But, like, but
Oh,
thanks thanks for that piece of information, Joey.
yeah,
But, like, but now they're like, "We done fucked up." And, I'm also hearing from my ex that, like, in her part of, like, the southeastern Ohio, that all of the Trump signs and flags that she was seeing in her neighborhood have suddenly disappeared. And I think that that gives me some sense of hope, even if they fuck with elections. And I think that's the thing that I at least want to end on, is that, like, I am not saying this for voter suppression. I am somebody who has done voter shit for a very long time, even though I recognize the Democrats as a center right party. I also recognize Republicans as the fascist party, so I chose wisely. But, like, my and I do think that we probably need some other, I personally think we would benefit from a healthier party system. However, even if elections are rigged or stolen or fucked with, as a number of individuals, including people that I think are very removed in some kind, not a removed, but I want to say unaffected in some kind of ways, who are like Heather Cox Richardson and other individuals who are like, yeah, they're trying to fuck with elections, but know that they can fuck with elections, but that does not necessarily mean that our goose is cooked. I
right,
think that when people who study fascism say that, like, 80-90% of fascism is terror management, is like,
yeah,
it's all psyop, like, that shit is true. They want you to give up, so our goose is not cooked, in
right.
those situations. And I think knowing that and expecting it and not being surprised and also having a fucking plan, that, I mean, Democrats aren't going to try to find a plan, but that doesn't mean that everyday neighbors do. I think if people stop looking at the elected officials as their mommy and daddies, and and start doing, I mean, like, that, it's annoying to me. Yes, they are absolutely on the taxpayer dole, and they're not doing their damn jobs, but that doesn't mean that you can't speak out, that you can't organize locally, and those things matter way more than you know. Because if you want to know how Christian nationalists got into power, as somebody who studied them, they built parallel systems of support. They started from the bottom up with local positions that nobody was fucking paying attention to. They started doing all sorts of shit that just slowly built, and it didn't. They're not a large movement.
They're
Christian
really
white
not.
they're not. They're such a small portion of the population, which I think in some ways, inadvertently, when you talk about Erica Chenoweth's 3.5% of the population, that misquoted thing that gets used all the time to talk about, the barometer for pro-democracy movements. I mean, white Christian nationalists, I think, are even less than 3.5% of the population, and they have fucked up all this shit. So when you've got a lot of angry people, as long as you get them organized, there isn't anything that we can't do.
Yeah, we, in a few school districts here around the Houston area, we had, some far right types that did that, took advantage of of, elections that nobody was paying attention to, got elected to school
Mhm.
boards, stuff like that. Came time for reelection, all of them lost to progressives because even a centrist Democrat was having a hard time getting enough traction, but progressives making the biggest noise, pointing out the biggest problems, with trying to ban books, things like that. They're the ones that got the attention. And I mean, they full sweep. There was, three of the five seats were up for grabs. They were all being held by far right Republicans, and they all lost to progressives. It happened in like three different school districts too in our area. So, yeah, I
That
think that I think if you mobilize voters, even here in Texas, because in Texas we have so many voter suppression laws, I think we've been labeled the most voter suppressed state in the country a couple times.
Mhm.
And I think even if you mobilize voters, educate them about the laws so they know how to navigate the laws, and get them out to vote, I think Texas becomes purple again. Easy.
Yeah,
Easy
yeah.
because, what was it? 8 million stayed home in Texas in 2024. Had they went out and voted, we probably could have had at least a handful of Democrats win here. We had a couple. They were obviously progressives. Progressives do well in Texas because of economic populism. You have to be an economic populist in Texas. It's
You
an oil-rich state.
yeah.
So, why Democrats keep trying to push these centrists, trying to convince us that we should accept anti-abortion Democrats, pro-ICE Democrats like Henry Cuellar.
We don't need
Um,
them.
Pelosi tipped the scales in his favor over the progressive candidate, and of course he won. And now in Texas and in Congress, we have two Democrats from Texas that vote almost all the time with Republicans and
Yeah.
anti-abortion. It's just ridiculous to think that this is who Democrats would rather have as opposed to a progressive.
Well,
And
it's what their billionaire backers wanted. I mean,
right,
I think I mean, like and this is the thing though, that is, like, so frustrating, and I but as somebody who has done GOT, the amount of volunteers that I have trained is in the thousands when it comes to GOTB, and I've, like, been in the hives, like, the GOTB hives, like, I've oh my god. Well, so as someone who has seen the get out the vote ground game, it is so it's not that it's hard. It's simple but not easy. But when I tell you if you can do one thing or three things, do join in get out the vote stuff, the door to door stuff. Also be a legal observer. It's something that I've noticed as somebody who's always on the back end, doing volunteer stuff. They never have enough legal observers, and it pisses me off in some cases that, like, Democrats don't even it's like they wait until the damn end, and it's like, "Are you asleep?" To what is happening here? How are you unprepared? But the thing is, you don't have to wait for Democrats. You can call your, like, local Democratic Party, and you can be like, "How can I be a legal observer?" Right? Even if you are, turning your nose up at Democrats, you can do that. And the other piece, and this is nonpartisan, is that, and I want to tell you that they accept all genders because I was the first, trans non-binary, member of the League of Women Voters in
nice,
Central Indiana when I was there.
nice.
When I lived in yeah, I lived in Muncie, Indiana for a minute, and, they were like and it was like these, like, sweet, like, I thought for sure that they were gonna be like,
Yeah,
"No, like, we don't want you," right? Because they were like, d like like, ladies in their, like, mid-70s that I thought for sure were gonna be like, "Nah, we don't want you," and, like, this kinda, like, post-industrial.
yeah,
Muncie, Indiana is, like, really is down on its luck. It's being held up by duct tape, a hospital, and a university, and that is it. But they were like, "Yeah, we absolutely want you." But the thing about League of Women Voters is they are very, very good at not only informing voters, but they are very good at holding their secretaries of state and various other organizations to task. But they cannot do that without you. And the reason why I'm saying that, again, there are men who are part of the League of Women Voters. I fucking love it. Like they're just it's not really a gender exclusive organization, but they do a lot of important work, and I think if they said to me, and this was in 2016 or 17, they were like, "I'm so glad" and I thought they were gonna reject me, and they said, "I'm so glad you're here because we need younger people to help us. And there are things that we don't necessarily know how to do. And so if you are feeling hopeless and you are invested in elections right now, like those are three things that you can do and you do not have to wait for Democrats to ask you. I highly recommend, especially with the legal observers,
Yeah.
fucking call your local right now and be like, "How can I be a legal observer?" Because frankly, they should be doing those trainings well before midterms, right? They should be doing that shit now. They should be doing a monthly training and getting people so that they know the ins and outs of legal observers and shit like that. But there and I also think that that there needs to be some sort of anticipation for how, precincts could be used as an intimidating, some kind of voter intimidation, and thinking about like I'm planning right now for like volunteer, some kind of volunteer groups that help de-escalate situations and create a sense of like courage around those spaces so that people show up. So there are so many things that we can do. And I'm saying this as somebody who is not entirely believing that. I mean, I don't know. I know that our election system is decentralized and that gives me a little bit of hope. But I also know that Trump is a fucker who knows he's going to go to prison. So who knows? But my point is don't give up the ship no matter what happens.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, we have to do whatever we can, and if it's like we said earlier, either, speaking the truth, definitely, observers would be great election time because like you mentioned earlier, that's also a fear of mine, ICE agents and
Hmm.
DHS showing up at polling locations. And,
Yeah.
I guess the primaries will be a test of that to see if they do that. But yeah, I do expect some sort of when it comes to elections, I do expect like ICE, especially in places here in Texas where, we're 41% Latino and 40% white. They know ever since that came out of the 2020 census, that's when this massive charge against immigrants in Texas started happening. And it's obvious why.
Yeah.
It's obvious why. So yeah, I do think that's going to happen. I think observers are going to be a big key to trying to prevent any kind of intimidation or stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, we just have to keep plugging away. There's always stuff we can do. There's always people doing stuff. So
Yeah.
it doesn't take much. Even if you feel powerless or whatever, you read something that you think other people should read, share it. Like let people know like, "Hey, this makes sense. You guys should really check this out." It's a different perspective. It provides a little more detail, more context, whatever. Anything to help fight back against, what's happening right now. Like when you mentioned the media earlier bowing to Trump, it took me right back to those lawsuits Trump had against like ABC, like a $15 million lawsuit. And all the legal analysts were saying this is going to be an easy one for ABC, and they settled for 15 million bucks and gave him a check. And I'm like, "What the you said you could win this. Why are you giving him money?" So yeah, in this scenario where everybody seems to be bowing to him, I think we just all need to be very diligent. I know it's going to be a long 3 more years. I can't believe it's only been one. But yeah, I think that midterms might be if we can win in the midterms, I think it gives us some breathing room. It gives us a
Yeah.
moment, gives us a little bit of, okay, let's refocus. But yeah, I think we need to remain diligent. And no matter how much people say the next elections might be rigged, you have to get out and vote. Because
Yes.
if you vote in big enough numbers, they cannot rig it.
Right,
And
and I
period.
appreciate
Yep.
you saying that. Yeah, I mean, and to wit, right? When you see massive numbers, then you know, right? That's
Right.
the other thing is that, like, you could also be developing, like, the same thing I think would be really great too, and this is the last piece, and this is not for us necessarily, but I think about, some of the number of new media networks, even if there are I know that some of them are, like, beefing with each other or whatever, but, I think that it would be very advantageous for a number of these new media groups, regardless, to like get over their beefs and to create a situation where they develop an infrastructure for polling and for and for like reporting on the returns, because I do think that there's a reason why Trump bought up CNN and has hollowed out CBS with Barry Weiss. So that's another piece of this that new media can be doing, right? Is like, doing the kind of work
Yeah,
that would have been done by a responsible media that has now just decided, well, that's fine. Fascism is okay too. But we don't have to accept this shit. I think people sometimes think that institutions are all powerful and that once the leaders capitulate, that the rest of us are fucked. But as somebody who has been in a lot of institutional spaces, I can tell you that leaders are often they're cowards.
right.
So don't get fooled about that. Like, we are the ones that have always had the power. So,
Yeah,
Artur, this has been a really good conversation.
it's been awesome.
Night. Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me this evening, and I also appreciate everyone who's been here. Where can people follow you again for folks that are just tuning in?
Same name that I have here, it's at Extreme Arturo. I'm basically everywhere, Threads, Twitter, all that. Blue Sky. Yeah, I'm pretty much everywhere. And, yeah, I appreciate the conversation, and I know we've been threatening to get off of here for, like, 45 minutes, but
It's the Midwestern goodbye. It's the Midwestern goodbye. Welcome.
there you go, there you go. But yeah, no, I appreciate it. This was awesome. I'd been looking forward to this for the last few days, and like I said, I've been watching you grow on here, and I think it's really awesome. I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, everyone have a good evening and see you, Arturo.
Alright, bye.